back working at Uchee Pines a couple of months ago. A man had a problem of depletion of his body, his blood sodium, his salt in the blood. And we can't follow it closely. We don't have a lab right there on site. And it was a tremendous help to be able to send him to the local hospital where they can check on that. They can give him IVs. We generally don't do IVs, you know, the fluid right directly into the vein. And so what we do is with patients that generally are ambulatory, they're able to get up and take care of themselves. And we, and any of you that want to do natural things, which I see as very definitely the Lord at this time has given us some lovely things to do so that 80-90% of the problems can be taken care of at home. But if you see something that you don't understand well, you feel like you need help, always be ready to ask for help. Someone that has further knowledge. A physician does this all the time. He refers people to another physician that may have more knowledge. Uchee Pines is functioning, and someone mentioned to me yesterday, they said I should tell you a little more about Uchee Pines. It's going ahead well. It's got a good staff. The LCs, that's the name we give the lifestyle counselors who do the treatments with the patients. They're there doing a good job. And so if any of you are interested in taking that big trip, call Uchee Pines. You have I gave you the website. And if any of you want a phone number direct, I could give it to you afterward. It's been a real pleasure to be able to meet with some of you. There's several of you that I've been able to talk over health problems, and it's been interesting, and I've really enjoyed it. One gentleman from Botswana land told me some of his experiences. Was it yesterday or the day before? Some of the very things that I believe and do. And one of them that he told me, one of the points that he told me reminds me, I haven't emphasized this. In this kind of work, in this kind of health work, we want to understand the cause of the problem. We don't just want to treat symptoms. And so what I've said so far about food allergies, you remember yesterday we were talking in some detail about food allergies. We want to go even further than food allergies because you can always ask the question, well, why did those food allergies happen in the first place? And that's a really good question. I'd like it, if it's possible, to get that paper roll to write on. I guess I didn't say it last night, but if we can, that'd be really good. I want to give just a quick review as well as foretaste of some of the things. These are not great pictures. They were shot just in my family to give you an idea of a facial bath, for one thing. We haven't done that one yet, but I'm going to see if we can get this going here. There's a bowl. Is it? No, it's not showing up. Should I go back?
No, hold on a moment.
Okay. This is not the foot washing, this is face washing. Okay, thanks. Okay, this is just in the bathroom of an apartment where we were staying for a while. So there's a bowl that we're going to use for the facial treatments. Now here, we're talking about the food allergies in just the one manifestation, which is hay fever, sinusitis, this kind of thing where the face gets congested. And so we're going to put in that bowl water. You can see the water level there in it now. And you don't have to do this, but it actually makes it a bit nicer. If you put in salt in that water, you have to put in just the right amount, reasonably precise, so that it balances the fluids in the body. You know, when your eyes are open and you're in lake water, it actually is a little irritating to the eyes because there's no salt in lake water, and so the lake water tends to go in through the membranes of the eyes and irritate them. So if you put a little bit of salt, and the amount is 2 teaspoonfuls per liter. So, you know, you do it with 1 liter, say, and if that's not big enough for the bowl that you have, you go a little further. But that's the proportions. 1 teaspoon per half liter, or pint, as we used to call it. So here we're measuring out. This is just a teaspoon, one that has a teaspoon on one side and a tablespoon on the other, this measuring thing. There they're pouring in the salt. It took a little while to do that, I guess. Now there's the salt going in, mixing up the water, and now we're ready to get the face down in. My nephew there is the performer. And in this presentation, he just goes in with the forehead down to the level. The water goes, as he puts his forehead in, the water goes over the nose and up to the upper lip. You won't be able to see that well, but there he is. So he still breathes through his mouth. And now he's coming out, and one does a splash of cold water over the face. The water that was in the bowl is warm. It's not hot, but warmer than warm. Just it's reasonable. It's somewhat hot, and that tends to open up sinuses, helps the nose to drain. It can help colds. It can help all these things related to allergies. So that's the treatment. A simple treatment of facial bath is just doing it on your own. You don't have to have the salt. You can do it without the salt in the water. Another one, well, that's the end of that one. Another one that I would like to show you, maybe we can save it till the end of the presentation. We haven't shown you anything about fomentations, where one applies heat to the chest or to the abdomen or to the back. Actually, anywhere in the body you can apply heat with these rather thick cloths that we call fomentations, padded with towels going around them, so that the heat, which is the heat of steam, really, really hot, it has to be insulated with towels. And when you do that, you apply the heat for 3 minutes approximately, and then you take it off. It's already cooled some, and you go over with mitts or a face cloth that comes out of ice cold water. You get rid of the dripping, but you don't wring it down very much at all, and you vigorously go over the area that you've just applied the heat to. That cold is applied for about 30 seconds, and then you go back to another application of heat, which should be a new fomentation that comes out steaming hot. So that kind of treatment requires quite a bit of activity on the part of the one that's doing it. Getting the fomentations ready and, applying the cold. The cold, of course, is very much noticed by the patient. But he's already warm in that area, so it's nothing terrible. And then you apply the heat again. What that is doing is the heat opens up the blood vessels. More blood comes into the area. The cold constricts them, gets rid of the old blood that's been there for 3 minutes, giving it some oxygen and nutrients. When it constricts like that, the blood leaves quickly. And then when you apply the new fomentation, it's a new load of blood from the heart. It becomes rosy red, And that's the greatest mechanism for getting good results in tissue that has become infected or has problems of various kinds. One can use fomentations with contrast. We use the term revulsive. The fomentation is the heat, and then the cold makes the body revulse against the blood vessels contract and revulse the water. Then the heat brings in new blood. That whole procedure can be used against pneumonia, bronchitis. There's all kinds of various things that you can do in various parts of the body with these contrast treatments, or the heat with revulsive. Those of you that have gotten the handout, not a handout, it's that little booklet of hydrotherapy, will find a number of different things for using fomentation, a number of disease processes. Now, what I'd like to do at this time is show another kind of facial bath. Yes, question? We would tell the patient to be careful not to breathe through the nose. We don't want water to be going up. Now you can do, there is another treatment, we haven't talked about it, you can actually do a nasal irrigation. There's a little pipe that you can stick up one side of the nose and you run water through it and it comes down the other nostril. And that also does help clean sinuses. So it's not just one treatment, there's several things you can do for this hay fever sinusitis problem. Brother Bernard, are you able to come up? And okay. Brother Bernard is, actually it's Dr. Lendor. He's actually an ENT physician, and he's very willing soul to. This is actually, sinusitis is the specialty of the ENT doctors, but like I was telling you about my uncle, he was willing to try this. He was an ENT worker. What we're going to do with this is all just a dry run, but it's even more effective than what I showed there with my nephew doing just one sink full of water and putting his face in it. In this, we're going to be doing, on one side, one bowl will have hot water, not terribly hot, quite warm, that the face will go into. The other one will have cool water, and you make it even colder as we go into the treatment. So you're going to do a contrast treatment to the face, unlike what my nephew did. Now, what I wanted to have, let me just see if we've got this snorkel here. I don't know if I may have misplaced it. We had, okay, thank you. I said I wanted a snorkel, and somebody actually went to a store and bought fins and a snorkel, and so we're not going to be doing any swimming. The snorkel actually makes it way easier to do this treatment. There we are. We're all set. Tearing it open here. Thank you, Douglas. That's great. Just the snorkel part. That's it. This is all we needed. Now, actually, this should be, I don't know if I can rip this. Yeah, it would need a knife, I think. Can you? It's going to be awfully hard to tear. Anyway, when the person has their face in the water, unlike with my nephew who kept his mouth out, in this one we're going to immerse totally, and then you need to breathe. It's 3 minutes there. If one uses a snorkel, it's much easier. When they first started doing this is nearly 20 years ago, when I first heard of the idea, what they were using was just a straw that you could bend and try and breathe through that for 3 minutes. But a snorkel is much handier. Go right ahead, and we put that into the mouth. And so, in part, this is faking, but this is a real snorkel. So we're going to say that the warm water is here, Bernard, stick your face down in it. Good. So he would be immersed, if we were doing the real thing, in this very warm water for 3 minutes and breathing through the snorkel. And as this happens, we make sure that this cool water, cold tap temperature, is in the other side. Okay, let's say that we've finished that one, Bernard, and then you go over here and stick your face down in that. Now this warm water, I must now make it even hotter, and this would say is full of boiling hot water, just really burning hot water. And so we add to it, and we check it with our fingers so we don't go exceedingly hot, but we go to the point where it's reasonably warm. And now you're ready to come back. Remember, it's only, usually the contrast is 3 minutes in the heat, half a minute in the cold. Now, we make the cold even colder, and we're going to say that this has some ice in it. And we add ice to the cold water. We're not waiting the whole time. But now you're ready to go back to the cold over here. That's it, yeah, shaking with the ice water. And these are, of course, always very interesting times when one does these treatments, even faking it up here. Okay, and back. Okay, that gives you the idea. Thank you very much. Almost invariably, I want to really thank Dr. Bernard for his willingness to, this is his specialty, and here I'm doing this thing, but he's talked to me how he's been somewhat unsatisfied with the way in general medicine and medicine specialties too. A lot of it is just dealing out the pills. And he's interested in learning all that one can in this kind of medicine. So I've really appreciated talking to him and his son. We've seen the results many times of this treatment, and it's just wonderful. I was talking to Dr. Bernard about my uncle a number of years ago. He was an ear, nose, throat specialist as well. And he did this. We did it with the water, and he thought it was quite interesting. I don't think he had any problems right at that time, but it's something that's certainly worth a try. That same uncle of mine, even though he was not someone who was into all the details and emphasis on health that we're making here, he would eat his meat and drink his dairy, eat his dairy foods. Nevertheless, because he was very interested in treating sinusitis, because it's one of the main things that an ear, nose, throat doctor works with, he said to me that he told patients they really need to lay off milk products. And so, it wasn't even his practice of doing that personally, but he said it's just the way things are. One other thing I want to say that he left with me is that if the person has sinus problems, it really helps to keep the head warm, especially at night. And he would tell people to wear a wool cap. I grew up in Canada, and they called them toques, these sort of stretchable wool things that you can put over the head down to the eyebrows, and it goes over the back of your head. And also, to make it even more warm, all of the upper body, a scarf around the neck, a warm wool sweater, and it can be to the point where the person is sweating or nearly so through the night. That really helps get rid of colds and infections in all these upper airways, as well as even into the chest. Now, we ended it yesterday with saying that the first step to take if a person has allergies of any kind, not just the manifestation in sinusitis and hay fever, but a whole list of other ones, the first step was this one of leaving off dairy products and becoming not just kind of careful, but to really do it well, you pretty much have to be fanatically careful. because allergies, the allergy system in the body is so sensitive. Otherwise, it's not worthwhile doing it. And, you know, if you've done it for several weeks and you didn't get a response and you did it scrupulously carefully, then I'm not going to argue that you need to carry on. If you want to eat your milk products, it's not good for you for many other reasons, but you don't have to be so fanatically strict about it. But for the allergy issue, you do. What I wanted to say now is give you an idea of how widespread symptoms we're talking about with allergies. Do any of you remember what percentage of the population, at least in U.S., and I'll bet it's the same here, have food allergies? Does anyone remember the figure? I heard a 90. What is claimed, it's even 95% of the population. Now, that's not 95% that have sinusitis and hay fever. We're talking about all the different manifestations that food allergy has, and the range of problems a person gets is just tremendous. Even in thinking, poor memory, confusion at times, poor concentration, stuttering, learning disability, the emotions, mood swings, anxiety and fear, irritability, anger, depression, aggressiveness, nervousness, and so on. Headaches, faintness, dizziness, insomnia. In the eyes, we've already mentioned some of this. It can be watery, itchy, swollen, sticky eyelids, dark circles under the eyes. That's a standard manifestation of allergies. Blurred vision. In the ears, itchy ears, earaches, ear infections, drainage, ringing in the ears. That's one complaint that's often hard to deal with. And I think they often do go to ear, nose, and throat doctors, but I don't think they have a very easy time dealing with it. I know that I don't have an easy time with it, but one should think possibly food allergies are there as a cause. I won't go through all. It's just a wide range of problems, maybe one more system, and that is joint problems, joint pain, arthritis, stiffness, and feelings of weakness in certain areas, your overall energy level. Well, let's say that the person goes through that very first stage of being scrupulously careful about avoiding milk and any of its products. And we said that you should go at least 2 weeks. For all these different food allergies, the length of time is different, and the longest is 6 weeks. So let's say you go the second mile. You go 6 weeks, and you really haven't seen a major change in the symptoms that are there. Then it may not be that there is a milk allergy. It probably is. It could well be an allergy to another product. And I don't have a place to write this, but I want to tell you, within a vegetarian diet, what foods most frequently cause troubles, beyond animal products. Up at the top of the list would be corn. Do some of you use the word maize? Maize. Okay, I think here on this side of the Atlantic, the word maize is used. Now this, of course, would mean maize in the kernels, as we think of it, but not just that, because there's lots of ways that corn is used to get other products. One of the most frequent ways of sweetening foods and juices is not just cane sugar, but corn syrup. Are you all aware of that? And so a person can think he's avoiding corn when in fact he's using products that have that as the sweetening. It doesn't look at all like corn. Remember, when we're dealing with allergies, we're wanting to do an elimination that's down to the molecules. So if you haven't had success with the eliminating milk, the next steps on the way are corn and all its products. The next one down would be certain fruits. Perhaps the one that's most allergenic of the fruits is, unfortunately for me, strawberries. And strawberries, they're very appealing, but they're actually the fruit that they've determined has the highest concentration of pesticides. I think it's because, the fruit is exposed totally, and when they spray it, it goes right on the fruit. Bananas, oranges, the fruit that you eat is inside a capsule. I once heard about one fellow that had never seen or eaten a banana before. I guess must have been quite a while ago living up in the northern countries. He went down to where they ate bananas, and someone gave him one, and he went home and came back the next day, and they asked him, how was the banana? And he said, well, it was a little bit stringy. Boy, it sure had a big pit. Well, the poor fellow had eaten the banana skin and had thrown away the inside. So for him, the pesticides would have hit him, I think. But the way we usually eat it doesn't cause a problem that way. Strawberries, another fruit that is rather frequently a source of allergies, is apples. So not too far from those are citrus fruits. And then there is a whole family of vegetables that does cause problems. Strictly speaking, they aren't always allergic reactions. And by the way, I should clarify that. I'm using the word allergy in a little bit of an extended sense. In strict biological or medical terminology, allergy should be used only for what I showed yesterday, where you have an antigen and an antibody response, an immunoglobulin response. But sometimes a food causes a reaction without it being this antibody response. And this next family of foods is often like that. And what I'm referring to is the nightshade family. The nightshade family has in it potatoes, peppers, eggplant, and tomatoes. Now, that's a pretty basic list of foods. You can see we're digging kind of deep into our usual diet, our diet of, vegetarians. If you want to remember those ones, remember the word pet. P, peppers, potatoes, E, eggplant, T, tomatoes. You can add another T if you want. Tobacco is the nightshade family. It's curious to me that the ancestors of pretty well everyone here, if we go back a few hundred years before the New World was known, we never knew some of the most common foods. Almost all those nightshade foods are from the New World, from America. Maize, which is not a nightshade, maize, corn, is from the New World. Potatoes, even though we think of, the Irish and their potatoes, they only got to see potatoes after Columbus and others came back from the New World. Tomatoes are also from the New World. And so these foods turn out to be rather allergenic, or at least have fine sensitivities in human beings. The next one down on the list, the next group of foods that quite a few people are sensitive to and develop allergies is legumes. And this really does hit us vegetarians hard because that's a major source of protein. Well, what are the legumes? Beans, peas, lentils, garbanzos, food like that. Peanuts, even though we think of them as a nut, the name has nut in it, but actually, officially, botanically, it's a legume. It's inside a pod. The little peanut shell is like a pod around a bean. All of those quite frequently cause reactions, and so when we advise people to go off cow's milk onto soy milk, keep in mind, soy milk allergy is not rare at all, and they may need to use another kind of plant-based milk, and there's lots of them. Almonds, rice, and so on can be made into milk, so you don't need to be fixated on soy. After the legumes, I'm not sure if it's the next, but it's really hitting the hardest of all to me, taking out the core of my diet, and that is the standard grains, gluten grains. What are the gluten grains that have gluten as their protein? wheat, oats, barley. Rye has the least amount of gluten, and some people can tolerate that, but if you're going to be really strict, if they've developed a fairly major allergy to gluten, those 4 main grains have to be eliminated. And a person could throw up their hands and say, what can you eat? You know, you've taken away everything that a person like me eats. Actually, there's a number of things, but they're a little more, they're exotic. We have a write-up at UG Pines. I don't know if there's a Xerox machine here. I don't want to give my final copy away, because the kind of diet that I'm describing, eliminating these things, is quite detailed. If you're going to make this next step beyond elimination of milk, you really want to know what are the most common foods to cause allergies. Well, we've thrown away grains, and so you need to know what's going to replace the grains, and I'll give you a little sample of the allowed foods. Amaranth. What in the world is amaranth? Well, it is a grain that's out there. Buckwheat. I think most of us know buckwheat. The Russians eat lots of buckwheat. Millet is not a gluten grain. It's curious, though, that millet, with those tiny seeds, if a person has what we call celiac disease, celiac syndrome, where their bowel, the large bowel, reacts to wheat, often they'll do better also if they eliminate millet. Wow, that leaves very little, doesn't it? There is another grain here that's from South America, quinoa. And that's available. I'm sure it's available in London. And so buckwheat and quinoa, you don't need to have a dozen different kinds of grains. Many people live on just one. They say the Scots people lived basically on oats for centuries. You've heard of Samuel Johnson. He defined oats in his first dictionary in the English language. Oats is that grain which in Scotland is eaten by the people and in England is fed to the horses. And the Scotsmen didn't like that definition very well. And they said, yeah, that's why England is famous for its horses and Scotland for its men. So anyway, you can easily live on one grain, certainly on two. And there, for all the other things, the vegetables and the fruits that we've taken away, there's plenty that are still there. In fact, the list of permitted foods is, I would say, more than 24. I should mention a couple of other things. You do have to take away all the nuts. There are nuts that can have quite the reactions, including peanuts. And the first step would be to take away all the nuts. And what I find hard also is they say no even to garlic. Now in this, what we call the elimination challenge food sensitivity diet, or more simply, top A diet, the top allergens being eliminated, top A diet, they even say that rice should be eliminated. I've used rice in the diet and found that I think there are very few people that are sensitive to rice, that have any problem with rice. Well, so what are you going to do after you've eliminated? If you look at the list of eliminated things, it's also several dozen. And like we said, very basic foods. Is the person going to have to live the rest of their life without those? No. What you do is, as soon as you have gone, how long is it you do your trial? 6 weeks. This time you better make sure that it's 6 weeks, because plenty of those foods will have continuing symptoms for a number of weeks, not just 2. After you've finished the 6 weeks, the person needs to see clearly a major improvement. If it's not a major improvement, then we really haven't done enough worthwhile. Maybe he doesn't have a food allergy. But many people will see a major improvement. Now, when there's that major improvement, the next thing you do is you want to find out which foods were really at fault, because not all of them were at fault. You eliminated a large number of foods, and so what you do next is you start adding foods back into the diet, one at a time, only one, to see if it brings on the symptoms the person had before. Now, to do this is really a major undertaking. If you've eliminated, like we said, maybe 24 foods, you need time, and you also need to write it down, what's happening to you. So you need to make a diary, you need to make a logbook of what's going on, day after day. Some people will add the foods back 1 per day, but if you want to be really careful, the recommendations here are to, at the very least, 2 days, but here on the sheet it gives 5 to 7 days. So you see, it's going to take quite a while to get all the foods back in. You want probably more than 1 day, because remember, these are delayed reactions. Do you remember we talked about that? That was the problem. You don't see a reaction like you do in these terrible quick allergies. And so you need more than 1 day often. If you do it just adding 1 every day, you might miss. When you get no reaction, hopefully that food then is not causing you a problem, and you leave it in your diet. Let's say you eliminated wheat. You eat a good portion of wheat, whether it's several slices of bread or a wheat cereal of some kind. Eat that up, and you see how you go over the next 24 hours. And if there's no problem, then wheat is back in your diet. And you go back like that, food after food, adding them back in. As soon as you get a reaction, you suspect the food that you just added. And so then you leave it out. Now, if the reaction continues, it might not have been the last one you put in, particularly if you're adding them back in 1 per day. Then you have to look at the food you added in before that. I don't know if I'm making this clear to you all. Okay. So this project, especially if you leave 2, 3, 4 days between, this is going to take months to finish well. But hopefully it will give really good results. Now, one thing that we haven't talked about in all this discussion of food allergies, why does a person have a food allergy? Didn't God make wheat for us to eat? Well, I think so. I live on wheat. So why does a person become allergic to wheat? Now, it is true, some people have a constitutional, an inborn, actually a genetic problem in handling wheat. It manifests itself in the colon, and the colon starts changing as they're subjected to wheat. But most of these food allergies are not like that. Most of these food allergies very definitely come up later in life and for a specific reason. Our digestive system is, in a way you could think of it, the contents of the stomach and of the small intestine as being outside of the body. Think for a moment. Our mouth here, an open mouth, continues into an esophagus that's a tube. None of it is directly in contact with the bloodstream, all those contents. And so you could think of us as being almost, well, I guess a donut doesn't represent it right, but a passageway through, and then on the outside you've got skin. But the big difference is this. The inner lining is not tough like skin. Skin has layers of dead cells, and it can handle, lifting things. We can use it for handling things that are even kind of rough, and we get along fine. On the inside, you have no layer of dead cells. The first layer of cells is not only very much alive, it has a very selective process that it's doing. The starch we eat, if you eat a potato, that starch has to be broken down from a long chain of glucose, sugar molecules, down to individual sugar molecules. Digestion has to break up every protein down to its individual amino acids. And the cell on the lining of the stomach and of the small intestine is able to recognize when you've got to that final stage of just glucose, just an amino acid. And that's all that cell lets in, and then on the other side lets it get into the bloodstream. That's a pretty important job. If for some reason some of those cells are dead or badly injured, if they're very inflamed, what happens then is those injured cells may let contents of the stomach that are not fully broken down. Instead of one glucose molecule, you have 3 or 4 still tied together. That would then get into the bloodstream. That's a foreigner. How's the blood going to react? How do the white blood cells react to anything that's foreign? It's immediate attack. Our bloodstream does not tolerate, and the Lord made it that way, does not tolerate anything foreign. And so you've immediately got an immune reaction. One of the immune reactions is precisely making antibodies in order to attack these things. Well, if you get big enough chunks of those molecules, they become recognizable as certain foods. And so that's where you develop these allergies. Now, what would cause breakdown in the lining of the stomach and the small intestine? Any ideas? You can speak up more. Acid in the food. Actually, our stomach is able to put up with quite a lot of acid. I don't know if any of you have ever noted when you get some reflux into your mouth, that's pretty acid stuff. Those of you that know about pH, a pH of 1 is pretty acidic, and that's the acidity of the stomach for digestion. So it's not just acidity, but certain acids are rough, and I'll tell you one that particularly is rough and hard on those cells, and that one is vinegar. From the time I was small, my parents, my mother particularly, was quite strict, and she read and knew about vinegar being bad, so I didn't eat it. I wasn't that, how should we say, convicted about it, but I went along with the trend in the family and even at health centers. It was just maybe less than 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, that I was preparing some talks on the digestive system, looked up some material on the internet of research that's being done. In this research, they would subject the stomach to material that would cause an inflammatory reaction that would be damaging to the cells. And it was very interesting what they used. They used several different things, but one of the main ones they used was called acetic acid. Acetic acid is another name for vinegar. So there's no question about it. It's damaging to the digestive system. Now, I don't even like to see vinegar as a minor constituent of food, like in bread. They often put it in bread. I'm not sure why, but there it is. Another food that does it is mustard. That was another of the ones that damaged the line. They used mustard oil. I want to tell you perhaps the worst of all, I should say before I get to this one, won't apply to people here, but alcohol is very hard on the digestive system. Alcohol is for killing germs, for doing an injection or drawing blood. If it kills germs, it's going to kill cells in the body. But the one that I want to come to is aspirin. Aspirin and all its colleagues, like ibuprofen, naproxen, and so on, what physicians, at least in North America, call NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. These stop the production of mucus that protects the stomach lining. Well, if you don't have the mucus there, what's going to happen with all those digestive enzymes that tear apart proteins? You're going to be really damaging the stomach lining. So all of those are big causes of food allergies. Well, I think I'm going to stop here, and I want to ask if there are any questions that you have. Maybe I should say one point further. After you've added all those foods back in that are allowable, remember we were talking about how you, one by one, and now you've got just those ones that caused a problem that are eliminated. Even those ones, later on, you may be able to put back in, but you need to wait for a good length of time, like 6 months, so that the stomach can recuperate. There's lots more that one could say, but I think we should leave it at that. Yes.
Yes. Is it possible to reconstitute that damaged lining of the stomach, or is that damage permanent in the GI tract?
Okay, very good question. It can reach the point where it's permanently damaged. That's not usual. But if a person reaches the point of ulcers, there you have a wound that's deep, it's excavated. And what's going to happen after an ulcer is basically scar tissue. But for most people, most of the time they can get back to where they were. One of the most excellent things that helps is aloe. Aloe, those of you that know the fleshy leaves of the aloe plant, when you break them, what kind of stuff is there oozing out? Slimy, gooey stuff. And that, I think of it as being like the mucus that lines the stomach. Aloe is incredible for healing burns on the outside and healing burns and wounds on the inside. So that's part of the program. And so I can't give you a percentage, but most of the time you can recuperate. The digestive system is one of the most amazing things for being an organ system in the body that gets damaged every day. You think a person eating food, that has to be digested, and you've got these, I compare them to chainsaws that rip apart protein. You know, there's lots of protein in vegetarian food. And remember, our stomach, our intestine is made of protein. And so inevitably there's going to be some breakdown, even with eating the best way possible. The Lord has made that lining of the intestines and stomach so that it quickly recuperates if you give it a rest between meals. Wow. That's why you should wait 5 hours. Don't take in anything nutritious, not even a drink that is nutritious. It should be water or a tea of a herb without any sweetening, without any milk or milk substitute. Any other question?
Over here. You said vinegar is very damaging to the lining of the stomach. Mm-hmm. What about, I hear people advocating the use of apple cider vinegar for treating heart problems. So
there is a book out there by a Dr. Jarvis. I think it's from the early 1900s. And he proclaims quite loudly apple cider vinegar is great. I'm not going to argue whether he gets relief of some symptoms, but we know too much about the damage that it can cause. So, that book proclaims it. I haven't seen any other one that touts for vinegar loudly like his. And what I quoted you is recent research, that they use the very same chemical as vinegar, which is acetic acid, to actually cause the damage to the lining of an animal stomach so they can experiment with gastritis. So the evidence is really clear.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
My question is...
You know, I want to ask, like Dr. Chitty, if a person could stand up. I love to look at your face. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, you're way back there. Okay, speak on.
Yeah, what I would like to know is those painkillers tablets like naproxen, the doctor will say to you that it will damage your stomach lining, but then they will give you another tablet, 2-in-1, to protect your stomach lining. My question is, how good is that? And if you go back and say to your doctor, then I'm having this side effect, they'll give you another tablet to combat that side effect. So where do we go from here?
Often they don't necessarily, you're giving an example of where they actually change the drug. Often what happens, they give you one drug and the side effects that one has, they'll give you another drug to chase that side effect, and then there may be a third one. Yeah. Well, he's being honest with you, and that's nice. Okay. He recognizes that it has a problem. The way we handle the stomach problems, well, maybe we should talk about what they're giving the naproxen for, the pain. Mm-hmm. I'm going to talk about, I'll take 1 minute to talk about what's probably one of the most common, not probably, definitely one of the most common pain problems, maybe the most common. In U.S., it's the second reason for visiting doctors after mothers taking their kids for colds and upper respiratory infections. And I'm talking about back pain. There's probably more than 1 or 2 people that have had back pain in their life here. Pains anywhere in the body, people give these painkillers, aspirin, naproxen, and so on. In the prestigious medical journal Spine, they had an article a few years ago on using medicines, in fact, I'm pretty sure it was one of the standard non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, ibuprofen, that was used. They compared the results of using that with using heat, just heat. And the results of heat for alleviation of the pain were better. Now, they didn't get into more detailed use of heat and contrast, or cold at times in an area that's inflamed is remarkable in its effects on getting rid of the pain. So you don't need to jump at these chemicals. I know aspirin originally came from willow bark, but it's changed chemically from the willow bark. And it's changed enough so that it really is very damaging to the stomach. So, and the same thing is true of naproxen. And so we'd urge you to take a different route in handling those.
Doctor, what can we do to help ourselves to reverse asthma?
Oh, okay, here's...
Yeah.
Okay, asthma, often this whole issue of food allergies figures in that asthma is part of it. I didn't read my whole list of symptoms, but asthma and shortness of breath is very definitely one of the results of food allergies. For the more short-term treatment of asthma, actually doing heat treatments helps dilate the bronchi. The big problem in asthma is that the airways are constricted. That's what causes the whistle of a wheeze when a person breathes out. And so you want to dilate those airways. And you can do it with just applying heat. Another added feature would be a steam treatment. Quite helpful there would be adding a drop or two of eucalyptus oil onto the water that's boiling in a pot. And then you'd cover the person with a towel or a sheet, and they breathe from that. There are a number of other things. There are herbal treatments that can be added in that help with bronchodilation, opening the airways. So long term, though, I would start doing this kind of search for food allergies. Always doing it in that order. If you can take care of the problem with simply eliminating milk products and all animal products, if you can get your problem down to where it's hardly giving any symptoms, why take this big project on of trying to find other foods that cause the trouble? Yes, one up here. Yes, stand up.
Yes. Could you emphasize a bit on garlic for me? My daughter just recently mentioned to me, Mom, don't use garlic because she's heard it's not good.
Okay.
Especially for African Caribbean people. What's the link?
Okay, good question. I don't know about it being different for African people. Okay, the question was, what about garlic? She's heard on the media that garlic is a problem, that it's toxic. And this is what needs to be said. Garlic, when it's raw, is way too harsh. We just talked about vinegar being rough, but garlic, have any of you ever chewed on a garlic pin? It's pretty rough stuff. And I've got a book where they quote research that it's actually toxic to white blood cells. I don't know if the Lord really planned for us to be eating any garlic in the Garden of Eden. But it's a tremendous medicine. And if you look closely at the verses in the Bible, it looks like there was some added things that God gave after the fall of man, of the green herb, the different kinds of herbs. Garlic should be taken steamed. And when you do that, just your mouth tells you right away it's quite different. Instead of that very harsh effect in the mouth, it becomes pleasant. It's as gentle as eating a baked potato. And I have a terrible time. I've tried it a couple of times when I didn't know that it was that bad for you. eating a garlic just raw like that. But now when we steam it, even little kids, when my kids were small, they would eat up half a dozen or a dozen of those garlic cloves steamed just right away. No problem at all. And I don't believe there's any difference there between the black and the white. A lot of what's said that's different, obviously the skin has pigment difference, but even what Dr. Chitty was quoting about high blood pressure, I heard an outstanding African doctor say that when he went into the wild regions of Africa where they weren't contaminated by the way civilization eats, there was no high blood pressure. Okay. Thank you. May the Lord bless you all.